Ladies and gentlemen, the real world gives us horses, but plaintiff is asking us to maintain a unicorn. Cave of the Breezes is a local attraction in West Steelton, and Cave of the Breezes Expeditions is a cave touring company. They're involved in the business of leading the public on cave tours and teaching them about the cave's history and making sure that everybody gets in and out safe and doesn't get lost. You'll learn that the landslide that occurred on April 30th, 2017 was extremely massive. It covered over 10 square miles and it flooded the highway right next to Cave of the Breezes. It covered the entire entrance to the cave. And you'll also learn that it happened very quickly. The landslide that occurred at Cave of the Breezes on April 30th is called a debris avalanche, and that these landslides can happen with almost no warning. And you'll also learn that it took 37 days to clear out the debris deposited from this landslide. Cave of the Breezes, again, is a cave touring company. They are not the National Guard, they are not FEMA. They do not have bulldozers and excavation equipment on site to deal with any possible emergency. And they don't close every single time that it rains. The evidence will show that to ask them to do so would be like comparing horses to unicorns. On April 30th, 2017, the Pit Bulls hockey team entered Cave of the Breezes, and they received a safety briefing from one of Cave of the Breezes' tour guides. And in that safety briefing, they were told to stay together. I expect Max Petunia will tell you that the team was told to stay together in the event of an emergency, and that when this landslide occurred, they did in fact stay together. When this landslide happened, Bobby Daly immediately called 911 and got a rescue team together and decided to accept the help of Howard Sent to get the hockey team out in time. And on the third day of the cave-in, when Howard Sent's machine drilled into the cave, the hockey team was found all together. And everybody that was trapped in the cave made it out alive. And everyone else except for Max Petunia came out uninjured. And while we feel sorry that Max was injured, we ask that you not decide this case based on sympathy today. Because the real question here is whether Cave of the Breezes is legally responsible for what happened to the plaintiff. Plaintiff wants you to believe that this case is about the landslide being unforeseeable. But what they won't tell you is that the U.S. Geological Service never issued a warning for the area of Cave of the Breezes, and that a survey conducted the year before in 2016 did not reveal any increased risk of landslides. What this case is about is really two things. One, that Cave of the Breezes made life-saving decisions following the landslide. And two, plaintiff assumed the risk of his injuries when he walked into that cave. As to my first point, that Cave of the Breezes made life-saving decisions. I expect that plaintiff will tell you that Cindy Cooney, one of Cave of the Breezes' tour guides, told all of the hockey team in their safety briefing to stay together. And I also expect that he will tell you that the hockey team did in fact stay together. So when Howard Sent's robot reached them under miles of dirt and debris, they were all together and they were all able to be rescued. You'll also get to hear from Bobby Daly, the owner of Cave of the Breezes, and he will tell you that when he realized what happened on April 30th, he immediately got a rescue team together. And that he realized that this landslide was so massive that a regular means of rescue would not work in this case. And that Howard Sent's innovative technology might be the boys' only hope getting out of that cave alive. And he'll tell you that on the third day of this cave-in, that Howard Sent's machine was able to extract every single member of the hockey team out alive. And I also expect that he'll tell you that ultimately it took 37 days after the landslide to clear out all of the debris. Now, as to my second point, that plaintiff assumed the risk of his injuries when he walked into the cave. I expect the evidence will show that plaintiff knew that cave exploration was inherently dangerous. I expect that he will tell you that he knew of another landslide occurring at Cave of the Breezes 50 years ago, and that it was very tragic and that people died. I also expect that he'll tell you he got a waiver form to sign about a month before the trip, and that this waiver specifically warns against landslides and warns that certain rescue efforts might be made. And I will expect that he'll say that either he or his parents signed this waiver, and that on the day of the landslide, Max Petunia knew that it was raining heavy the day before and the day of, and he still walked into the cave, knowing all of these things. So I ask that you remember these 2 points throughout this trial. And at the end of this trial, my co-counsel, Connor McElroy, is going to ask that you find Cave of the Breezes not liable. Thank you.
All right. We'll hear the plaintiff's first witness.
The plaintiff would like to call Max Petunia to the stand.
Good afternoon, Max. Just going to ask a couple questions. First, I just want to talk a little bit about what Cave of the Breezes did a little bit before the landslide and after. Okay. So, April 30th, your team arrives at Cave of the Breezes, right?
Yeah, we got there. Some of those team members were really excited because they couldn't go on the trip the year before.
And you're met by a tour guide when you guys get there, right?
Yeah, I think her name was Cindy. She was the one who was kind of stumbling over her words.
Cindy Cooney was your tour guide. Okay.
Yeah.
And she gave you a briefing before you guys really went into the cave, right?
Yeah, I remember there was like a small warning beforehand, but then she went in the cave with us and gave the larger sort of 30-minute warning. But it was pretty much the same thing about in the event of emergency, stick together.
Okay, so you remember her telling you guys to stay together?
Yeah, I do. I do remember that.
Okay, and so now I want to talk about after the landslide happened. When that landslide happened, one of the first things you guys did was make sure everybody was together, right?
Yeah, our coach was pretty good about that. He just reminded us, we got to stick together. Some of us were still looking for their exit or emergency supplies. We couldn't find either, but our coach did remind us to stick together.
Okay, and you spent some time stuck in the cave, and eventually, on the third day, the rescue robot burrows into the cave, right?
Yeah. On the third day, the robot did come through. The same day that my arm and leg were broken.
And when the robot showed up, though, everyone was together.
Yes, luckily enough, everyone was together.
So everybody was able to get into this rescue robot and be evacuated from the cave.
Yeah, I mean nobody else broke their arm and leg. I mean everybody else was still suffering from the effects of not having food or water for 3 days. But
you were the only person who was physically injured.
yes, I was.
Objection calls for speculation.
Counselor?
Your Honor, I'm asking the witness about something that is reasonably within his realm of knowledge if his teammates were injured or not. He doesn't make.
What do you anticipate he's going to say?
I anticipate he is going to say that he was the only one injured.
Okay. And you believe he's going to testify to that because he has personal knowledge of it?
Yes.
All right, anything from...
Just that this witness, assuming I'm heard outside the presence of the jury, can only testify to his injuries. He can't testify to the injuries of his teammates.
Well, he
Not
certainly
personal
can't
knowledge.
testify on an expert level. He can't say, like, he has, injury to the third or fourth, whatever, in the spine. But if they didn't have any injuries, he could testify to that, couldn't he, as long as he knows?
As long as he knows. Yes.
All right. So we'll rely on the witness to say whether or not he knows the answer to the question. If he knows the answer, then we'll ask him to answer.
Okay. So Max, just to be clear, nobody else was physically injured.
Well, I know that I was the only person with my arm and my leg broken.
Okay. And do you know how long it would have taken to get you guys out of the cave?
Objection calls for speculation.
All right, Counselor?
Your Honor, I'm just asking if he does know. And I expect that this witness will say that he doesn't.
Okay. If that's the only answer he provides, then I'll overrule the objection.
Do you know how long it would have taken them to get to you using regular methods?
I mean, I would guess over 3 days, but other than that, no.
Your permission to read a stipulation to the jury, specifically stipulation number 6.
Okay.
Members of the jury, I'm reading stipulation number 6. It took a total of 37 days to reopen the main point of egress and ingress to Cave of the Breezes. Now, Max, I just want to talk a little bit about the type of information you had before you went into the cave. So, you knew that cave exploration could be dangerous, right?
I would a little bit. I mean, I didn't get to hear too much about the trip because the year before the trip was canceled because of bad weather.
Well, you know that 50 years ago there was another cave-in at Cave of the Breezes, right?
I think I remember my grandparents telling me something about that, about 30 people or so dying or something along those lines.
So people died.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were also given a waiver form by Cave of the Breezes, right?
Yeah, I think that was the one that my mom ended up signing.
Okay, and that was about a month before the trip, right?
Yeah, for sometimes in the pit bulls we had to go on, trips like this, so I had to sign these waiver forms.
And you'd agree with me that a month is a pretty long time to read something, right?
Yeah, but I think, with these forms, there was quite a few of them on the team, so it'd sort of go through and, Mom, you need to sign this, can I sign for you? That was the extent of reading it.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Counsel Elizabeth. sorry.
Thank you.
I just handed you a document. Do you recognize what that is?
Yeah, so this looks a lot like the one that my mom ended up signing, or except without her signature, of course.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time I offer Exhibit A into evidence. It's been stipulated as authentic by both parties pre-trial.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, hearsay.
Counsel, I'll hear you on hearsay.
Yes, Your Honor. This counts as an exception to hearsay because it is a business record retained by the defendant. Both parties have already stipulated that these documents are what they purport to be. Cave of the Breezes is a business, and these are waivers that they hand out to every customer.
Anything else from the plaintiff?
Just that this particular witness is not an employee of the defendant and not involved in any of the business operations. So
All
I
right.
can't certify it as a business record.
Overruled.
Okay, Max, so I'm just going to go through a couple of these parts of this waiver, not the whole thing, but so under assumption of risks, it says, the first sentence, it says, I understand that cave exploring by its very nature includes certain inherent risks that cannot be eliminated regardless of the care taken to avoid injuries. Did I read that correctly?
Yep.
Okay. And the next sentence, it goes on to say, some of these involve minor bumps and bruises, superficial injuries, or on rare occasions, broken bones. Correct?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Okay. And now, onto the second page. Under consent for emergency treatment and rescue. So, on the second to last sentence in that paragraph, it says, I also consent to all emergency rescue efforts in the event of an unforeseen catastrophe such as a cave-in, landslide, or other such event. Did I read that correctly?
Yep.
All right, and the last sentence, it says, to the extent that this form is being completed for a minor, I acknowledge that the risks on behalf of the minor for which I am signed. Correct?
Yeah, I think, definitely what it says.
Okay, and now you had said on direct that it had been raining heavily the day before the landslide, right?
Yeah.
And it was raining heavily the day of the landslide.
Yeah, I mean, not as much as I had the day before, but certainly a good amount.
And the trip wasn't canceled that day.
No, Cave of the Breezes was open, unlike the year before.
And so you went into the cave anyway.
Yeah, I figured that these people knew what they were doing.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Bobby Daly.
Bobby, what do you do for work?
I am the owner of Cave of the Breeze Exploration.
Can you explain to the jury what Cave of the Breezes Expeditions is?
So we are a touring company of Cave of the Breeze where we allow people to go into the cave and we do guided tours so they can explore the cave and see what nature's adventure allows us.
Okay, so how did you go about, how did you become an owner of a cave touring company?
So a friend of mine knew the past owners of Cave of the Breeze and knew that they wanted to retire, so they told me about it and I thought it was an interesting business, so I bought the business off of the old owners.
So you bought the businesses off the old owners. How long ago was that?
A few years or so.
All right, so as a cave touring business owner, what kind of things do you do from day to day?
I run more of the back end of the business, so I do the management, I do payroll, I do marketing, more of the business side rather than the cave touring side.
Okay, so if you run the business side, who actually does the cave touring part?
Chase Quinn does the touring side. You know, he teaches all the guys how to do proper safety precautions. You know, he does all the touring stuff while I do the more back end stuff.
So who's Chase Quinn?
Chase Quinn is one of the leading tour guides in my company. He's been there for 25 years. You know, he worked with the old owners, and then I kept him on because I thought he was really good at his job, so I kept him on.
Okay. Now, plaintiff has said that the landslide that happened on April 30th last year was foreseeable. Did you ever get any kinds of warnings about a possible landslide at Cave of the Breezes?
No, absolutely not. We had a land survey done less than a year ago before the landslide, and they said we were all clear. We were good to go.
Okay. So now I just want to talk to you a little about the decisions you and your company made on April 30th. So before the hockey team went into the cave, do you know what happened before they got into the cave?
Before they got in the cave, Cindy gave the safety warning, and then they went into the cave. A few minutes later, I saw Cindy come out of the cave because she forgot her emergency pack.
Okay, you said Cindy did a safety briefing. Do you know what was in that safety briefing?
Objection, hearsay.
Counselor?
Not sure.
Well, first of all, what do you anticipate the witness is going to say?
Well, I anticipate that the witness will say that Cindy Cooney gave instructions for the hockey team to stay together, and that that these instructions affected the hockey team in that they listened to these instructions, and that's sort of what kept them together when the landslide occurred.
Okay. Then why
So
would
effect on the listener.
Yes. I'll hear you.
Objection withdrawn.
Don't have to withdraw. You can disagree, but overruled.
Okay, so Bobby, let me just ask you again. What was contained in those safety instructions?
Well, there was some basic instructions, like always wear your helmet, make sure you have 3 points of contact before you remove a hand or a foot. But then there were specific instructions about, in case of emergency, to stay together and to stay put.
Okay. So now I want to talk about right after the landslide occurred. What did you do when you realized that the entrance to the cave was completely covered?
Well, I knew we needed help, so I called 911 and I had Chase do a head count of all our guides and all of our guests to see who was in the cave and who wasn't in the cave.
Did you discover who was in the cave?
Yes, the hockey team was unfortunately in the cave.
Okay, so you realize that the hockey team is stuck in the cave. What do you do next?
But we have to figure out a way to get them out of the cave because they had very little food and water. So we were trying to figure out how to get them out of the cave, and then Howard Stent heard about what happened, and he gave us this technology that he created.
Could you explain to the jury what that technology was?
So it was kind of like a rescue pod from one of his moon projects. He put a drill on the one end to drill through the mud, and then it had a pod in it, and where the person could lay down flat, and then it worked like an elevator, like pulley system that just like pulled them up from the cave to the surface.
Okay, so Howard Stent offers this technology to you. Do you end up using it in your rescue efforts?
Yes.
How successful was that technology?
Well, everyone got out of the cave alive, so I would call that pretty successful. And everyone didn't get hurt, except unfortunately Max, who was the last person to come out, and he unfortunately broke his arm and his leg.
Now, Bobby, you had mentioned before that there was sort of a race against time here. How long did it take to get the hockey team out of the cave?
Fortunately, we only took 3 days to get them out of the cave, so we did it really fast, and they all came out safe except for Max, unfortunately.
Okay, and how long did it ultimately take to clear out the entrance to Cave of the Breezes?
37 days. That's how much mud came off the mountain. It was a huge landslide.
Okay. So, Bobby, now I just want to talk a little bit about the information that your company gives to your patrons before they go in for a tour. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Counsel, should I try exhibit 1? Now, Miss Daly, do you recognize what that is?
Yes, it's our waiver and release form that we give to everyone who comes into the cave for a tour.
Why do you give these forms to everybody that goes into the cave?
Well, going into the cave is really dangerous because, you could get hurt, you can get bumps, bruises, you could fall and get hurt, and there could be possible cave-in. So we just do it to let everybody know what the risks are so they can decide for themselves if they want to explore the cave or not.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay.